Welcome to Just Settled. We're back here today on the podcast with Mike Bell, an incredible personal injury lawyer out of Birmingham, Alabama. Mike, thanks so much for joining us again today. We are happy to have you here.
Good to be back again.
Awesome. Yeah, so let's dive right in. This was a case we talked about a little bit earlier. Definitely an interesting one, different from the last one that we discussed on the last episode. So I'll kind of let you overview it. How did this case first come to you? What kind of case was it for the audience? And kind of what were your first thoughts when you were hearing about the details?
Yeah, so this case was actually a referral from one of our partner medical facilities that we work with here in Birmingham. So
Got
the client came in after seeing one of their advertisements and sought medical attention after her car accident.
it. And you said this car accident, it was like a T-bone situation or a two-way street, right? And they kind of just ran right in, they pulled out and ran into the person, or what was kind of the details of that?
Right. So our client was traveling along a two-way street. So about two lanes of traffic on either side of the street. She goes in front of a shopping center. She's approaching a shopping center, the exit to a shopping center, and instead of yielding to her,
Mhm.
the defendant pulls out of that shopping center and basically T-bones her near
Wow.
the front passenger side of her car.
Wow. Was there anybody else in her car with her, or was it just her alone in that?
No, she was actually the only passenger in that particular vehicle.
Gotcha. Okay. So what were your first, I guess, like if there were any concerns or uncertainties about this case's potential outcome, where did you see, challenges or stuff that may arise when you were kind of figuring out strategy in the beginning?
Right. So I wouldn't say there were necessarily any concerns or challenges per se. But one thing that I did kind of hone in on with this case is that the insurance company would probably pull out, some kind of defense saying that it was a low speed or a lower speed impact, seeing as though person is at that point pulling out and isn't, driving full speed.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And what were the client's expectations in terms of restitution? Like what were the severity of, I guess, injuries? How did you value this case, or how did you kind of see it playing out in terms of what they were expecting and what you were going to kind of go for?
Well, honestly, our client's injuries were, I would say moderate to major soft tissue injuries. So nothing, no invasive surgery or no invasive treatment. Pretty much physical therapy treatment, is what she had, and her expectations were, literally probably like this might be a 15, 20, $25,000 case.
Mhm.
Well, once we got into the case and then, we did receive diagnoses that she had, and we found out that she actually herself had about $75,000 of uninsured motorist coverage. We were not aware exactly what the defendant had because here in Alabama, the defendant's insurance company does not have to tell you what those policy limits are, up until the point that you file a lawsuit. So if you request it, they can send it, but they don't have to outside of litigation. So what we found out was is that when we were demanding the case, uh, the insurance company, which is one of the largest insurance companies uh, in the United States,
Mm.
they were the insurer on both the defendant side and on the plaintiff side. So they had the entire case. They, for whatever reason, did not want to settle this particular case. They did not want to settle it at all. It was probably 6 months, past 6 months to a year of just back and forth with this insurance company. Uh, one of the responses that we got from the adjuster's manager was that our client basically overtreated. They were saying that, well, your client went and ran up all these bills. Well, if you go to an emergency room and you see treatment after an accident, how can you be the person who runs up the medical bills.
Yeah, it doesn't
You're
make.
seeking treatment. And the
Mhm.
doctors are saying, well, this is emergency medicine, this is emergency situation. We need to make sure that you're stable, make sure nothing's broken, make sure
Right.
there's no internal injuries. So they're going to run a series of tests to evaluate you. Now, whatever that costs, that's the end or the final result. The client has no bearings on what their treatment looks like during
Yeah.
the emergency room situation. So that was one of the responses that we got, is that our client ran up an emergency room bill. I still to this day don't know how that's possible.
Yeah, that makes
So
no sense. That actually
so
it I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was gonna say, our client actually had almost, between the emergency room bill and her physical therapy treatment, she had almost $100,000
Wow.
in medical expenses.
Yeah, that is substantial. And you kinda touched on a lot of what my next question was gonna be, but I am curious. So there's obviously in these kind of cases, there's typical or more common obstacles I'm sure you come across, that you're used to. And then there's unique ones, right? That are unique to the case. I think you mentioned a couple in this case that obviously that um, it was slow speed. There was the insurance company, major insurance company, basically being the insurance provider for both the defendant and the plaintiff, and then all this emergency room stuff. Were there any other, I guess, unique or sort of specific challenges that were just this case, and you were like, "Oh, this is kind of going into an interesting space here that not every case goes into."
I would say probably not necessarily unique,
Mm.
but this particular case had an adjuster who, not the manager who gave us that response, but the initial adjuster was very, very non-cooperative, very,
Mm.
very non-responsive.
Okay.
So we we for the most part, adjusters who we work with are pretty much cordial. They're pretty much cooperative. For whatever reason, for this particular case, on that insurance company, that team of adjusters was a pain to work with.
Mm.
Horrible.
Yeah, yeah. I would imagine that would be frustrating. And you mentioned actually before you said it was like 6 to 12 months or something of just kind of back and forth. Um, in terms of the insurance company
Right.
delaying, what was the total timeline of the case from start to finish when this first came across your desk to settlement? What did that look like in terms of total timeline?
So you're talking about 18 months, the total timeline. So our client, for the most part, treated for about about an initial 12-week period. There was some follow-up treatment after that. So probably around the 18-week time frame of treatment. Uh, Once we got all the medical records and went through the rigor mode of that, we sent off our initial demand, and it was, every time a deadline came, we
Mm,
need more time.
okay.
And it was this kick the can down the road of, hey, just give us an offer. When the initial offer came in, the initial offer was so low that I had to keep my composure.
Yeah,
It was
that seems to be kind of a running thread of any of these cases is no matter what they try to kind of lowball, right? So um again, that goes right in my next question. When did you sort of realize that you may get a settlement here and that they will actually settle? How did that negotiation process unfold? Obviously, you said they did try to minimize compensation and lowball, but how did you kind of push back and advocate for your client's interest when you were negotiating that settlement?
right. So we on this particular case, we were reaching the 2-year statute of limitations.
Hmm.
And what happened was we still had no idea exactly the amount of insurance that was on the defendant's side. The initial offer in the case was $30,000 versus almost $100,000 of medical bills,
Yeah.
medical expenses. So actually was trying to get in touch with the manager who I spoke to before, just to talk over the case again.
Mhm.
An adjuster picked up who I guess had no idea what the case was about. She just picks up the phone and we were just going through, she was asking me questions and she inadvertently lets me know that there was on the defendant side well over $100,000 worth of insurance.
Mm.
So just with that information, we already knew that there was $75,000 worth of UM coverage. Now we know that there's at least $100,000 of insurance for the defendant. In the end of the case, armed with that information, we went to the manager when we finally got in touch with him and said, "Hey, we already know there's over $100,000 insurance. You know this state now, well, you know that this insurance company is on both sides of this thing, so why do we keep going down this rabbit hole of no return?"
Yeah.
So about 2 more weeks pass, and we finally get a policy limits offer on this case, which actually uh, the defendant's insurance policy as well as the coverage.
Okay. And then, um, so what was that final, like the outcome when all was said and done? What was the sort of the final outcome of the settlement? How did it positively impact your client's recovery?
Right. So it was we ended up with
Oh,
$300,000.
wow.
Yeah, right, right. We ended up with $300,000 for our client. And this is a client who has kids, she has a young family, and she was pretty much put out of work for months
Right.
with this accident. So just to be able to get that money in her hand at that point in time when she needed it,
Mhm.
to be able to take care of her family, be able to take care of her kids, she was overjoyed.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's another sounds like another successful case and another fortunate client that they were referred to you and came across you, Mike. So, thanks for sharing that story with us, and thanks for being a guest again on the podcast. And we hope to have you back here soon on Just Settled.
I look forward to it again.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.